Yo, what's up, friends? So today we continue our exploration of the different reshuyos, hotzah mereshus lereshus on Shabbos. Some interesting stuff are going to come up over here, including the different reshuyos on Shabbos, right? The 4 different types of domains that there are. Reshus hayachid, reshus harabim, karmelis, makom tur. We'll get to those a little bit later. Bigadol. Just a continuation of an explanation of the first Mishnah of Shabbos. So let us go on. We're learning today Daf Gimel of Masechta Shabbos. We are beginning on Daf Beis Amud Beis, towards the bottom, 3 lines from the bottom with the 2 dots. Let's do it. Amalei Rav Masna le'Abaye. So Rav Masna says to Abaye, Hatamne havyun, tartesre havyun. Okay, interesting. So our Mishnah had basically said that there are 8 instances of hotzah / achnasa on Shabbos, right? There's shtayim shein arba b'fnim, shtayim shein arba b'chutz. Okay, so basically 4 types of hotzah and achnasa for the balabayis, and 4 types of hotzah and achnasa for the ani. But Rav Masna points out that these aren't really 8, it really should be 12, right? It really should be 12, because after all, let's just say for the balabayis, so there's the 2 kinds of hotzah and achnasa that he would be chayiv midoraisa, right? When he picks it up inside of his house and then puts it down outside of the house, that would be hotzah. When he picks it up, does the akira outside of his house in reshus harabim, then brings it inside to his house and puts it down in his reshus hayachid, that would be hachnasa, right? For both of those, you'd be chayiv midoraisa, right? Assuming, so Rashi says something very interesting here on Daf Gimel Amud Aleph. He says, Kol chiyuv uftur, I guess, b'mesechta Shabbos, bechatas koi uv'shogeg. So whenever we say chayiv and pater in Masechta Shabbos, we mean chayiv to bring a korban chatas, because he did it by accident, okay? So therefore, in those first 2 cases by the Baal Abayis that I'm talking about, so he would be chayiv to bring a korban chatas, okay? Now, however, there's an additional 4 instances when it would be pater aval aser, right? He won't have to bring a korban chatas, but he's still not allowed to do it midrabanan, right? That is when the Baal Abayis basically sticks his hand out the window with something in it, right? And then he puts it down, right? And then there's when he doesn't put it down. Then the ani takes it from him and puts it down. And then there's also when he sticks out his hand with nothing in it, and then the ani puts something in his hand and he puts it down inside. Then there's also when the ani does the same thing. There's basically 4 additional instances that it would be pater aval aser. So really, for each of the balabayis and the ani, it's really shtayim, not shein arba, but really shtayim shein sheish, right? There's the 2 that they're not allowed to do midah oraisa, and then the additional 4 situations that you're not allowed to do midah rabbanan. So, and then you have that for the balabayis and for the ani, so that's really a total of 12 cases, not 8 cases. So the time and Abaye responds to Rav Masna, shitzrei havyan. Well, according to you, Rav Masna, it shouldn't just be 12. Why stop there? Say it should be 16, right? Because really there should be 8 instances for each of the 2, right? You have, let's say from the balabayis, you'd have the 2 that are asur midoraisa, then you have the 4 instances that are pater aval asur, but then, let's say for the balabayis, there are another 2 where it's completely pater, right? Where it's completely pater, which is when the ani does the akira and the hanacha, right? By hotzah and achnasa. So in those cases, the balabayis is completely pater. So why don't we add those as well, right? So we're saying we should say that kilu, it should be shtayim shein shmone for the balabayis and an additional shtayim shein shmone for the ani, right? There's the 2 that is chayev midah oraisa. There's the 4 that are pater aval aser, and then plus the additional 2 that are completely pater. So let's say that it's 16. So to that Rav Masna says, or at least the Gemara says, for Rav Masna to Abaye. No, so Rav Masna says to Abaye, ha lo kasha. No. It's for sure not going to be 16, right? We're for sure not going to include the 2 cases where the balabayis is completely pater and the 2 cases where the ani is completely pater. Because Bishlam Bava Deresha Pater Umutter Lo Katane, right? So Rav Masna says to Abaye, of course I'm not going to include the 2 cases for each the Baal Bayis and the Ani where they are completely pater, right? Elabava de Seifa de pater aval aser kasha. So Rav Masna clarifies that however the 4 examples that the Mishnah lists that the Baal Bayis and the Ani collaborate together, that is pater aval aser, so we should list each of those 4 for each of the Ani and the Baal Bayis, in which case there's the 2 for each of the Ani and the Baal Bayis that are they're chayiv midoraisa, plus the additional 4 for each of them that are pater aval aser, and we should have a total of 12. But of course we're not going to include the cases where the Baal Bayis is completely pater and the Ani is completely pater. But then Abaye says, what do you mean? Is there even such a thing as I even mentioned it yesterday, right? When I said in the Mishnah, it says, right? It says that if let's say the Ani kind of, picks up something in the Rishus HaRabim and puts it down in the Rishus HaYachid of the Baal Bayis, or if he picks something up in the Rishus HaYachid of the Baal Bayis and brings it out to the Rishus HaRabim and puts it down there. So we say that the Ani is chayiv and the Baal Bayis is pater. And I asked, what do you mean pater? Pater usually implies pater aval aser. So this is exactly what Abaye is saying. Or at least the Gemara is saying for Abaye, right? So, mi'ika bechule Shabbos pater umuter? Is there really such a thing as pater umuter? Right? Rav Masna just wanted to say that we're not going to include the 2 cases where the Baal Bayis is pater because that's pater umuter. But the Gemara says, is there really such a thing as pater umuter? Ve'amar Shmuel, I thought Shmuel said, koptur de Shabbos pater aval aser. That whenever we say pater in the context of Shabbos, it means aval aser. It means pater aval aser. So therefore, when the Mishnah says that, for example, if the Ani picks up something in Rishus HaRabim, sticks it through the window and puts it down in Rishus HaYachid, we say the Baal Bayis there is pater, it's going to have to mean pater aval aser, because pater always means pater aval aser. Bar me'ani tlas, except for the following 3 situations, there are 3 exceptions to this rule. De pater umuter, and that is tzedas tzvi, that is trapping a deer, v'tzedas nachash, trapping a snake, umapis mursa, and like popping some kind of boil to get the pus out. Okay, in those 3 cases, it's pater umuter. But in every other situation on Shabbos, whenever we say pater, it means pater aval aser. And therefore, the Gemara wants to say, at least for Abaye, that when it says that when the Ani, for example, picks up something in Rishus HaRabim and puts it down in Rishus HaYachid, that he is chayiv and the Baal Bayis is pater, it's going to have to be pater aval aser, in which case, that's why Abaye is suggesting that it should be shtayim shem shmone for each of the 2, and say that there are 16 cases in the Mishnah that are aser on Shabbos, or that are chayiv on Shabbos. So then the Gemara says, no, that is not a good point. Because ki itzturch le Shmuel p'turei de ka'avid maise. When Shmuel says that whenever we say in Shabbos pater, it means pater aval aser, it's talking about places where you actually do in action, where you do a maise. So if you do something, and we're saying that you're pater for doing that thing, so then it means pater aval aser, right? Even though you're pater for having done that thing, it's still aser nonetheless. However, in this case, where the Baal Bayis is doing absolutely nothing, while the Ani picks something up in the Rishus HaRabim and puts it down in the Rishus HaYachid, so it's going to be pater umuter, right? P'turei de lo ka'avid maisa ika tuva, right? However, things that you're pater for completely when you didn't do a maisa, there's lots of examples of that, and it means pater umuter. And therefore, to explain Rav Masna's question, the 2 situations where the Baal Bayis is pater, and the 2 situations where the Ani is pater, because the other person had done both the akira and the anacha, it means pater umuter, because these 2 people did absolutely nothing if the other person did the akira and the anacha. Okay, fine. And therefore, says the Gemara, mikol makom taites re'avyon. But nonetheless, what about Rav Masna's kasha? What about the fact that for each of the Ani and the Baal Bayis, there should be 6? You have the shtayim, you have the 2 that they're chayav to bring a korban, chatas for, if they did both the akira and the anacha, by hotzah and achnasa. And then there's the 4 for each of them, that if they participate in, they're going to be pater aval aser. So it should be 12. So the Gemara answers, P'turei da'asi behu lidei chiyuv chatas kachashiv, to la'asi behu lidei chiyuv chatas lo kachashiv. So the Gemara answers, this is why the Mishnah says Shtayim Shein Arba and not Shtayim Shein Sheish. It's because of those 4 Patur Aval Asers, we're only counting things that can lead to a chiyuv chatas. And what that means is that from the perspective of the Baal Habayis, right? So Rashi says, he says, right, V'raboseinu, I'm looking in the Dibra Maskal, P'turei de'isbu lidei, da'asibu lidei chiyuv chatas, and I'm towards the end, about maybe 5 lines before the end of that Rashi. So this is V'raboseinu omrim, our rabbis say that Pshitos Yad, Ligabe Shneim, Bein Melea, Bein Rekanis, Hi Tchilas HaMaise, Ve'ahu hu dekachashiv, Davlu Tarte, Ba'ani v'tarte Baal Habayis. That from the perspective of the Baal Habayis, right, or from the Ani, it's the extending of the hand that we're considering the main thing. And therefore, so from the Baal Habayis, right, so from the perspective of the Baal Habayis, let's say, so you have the Shtayim, you have the initial 2, which are when he does the Akira and the Anacha, and those are Chayav Achatas. But then there's the 2 that are Patur Aval Aser. What are those 2? It is when the Baal Habayis picks up the object and then sticks his hand outside the window, and then the Ani takes it from the Baal Habayis and does the Anacha. So in that case, the Baal Habayis did the Akira, and that is Patur Aval Aser, right? And in the second case would be when the Baal Habayis sticks his empty hand out the window, okay? The Ani then picks something up, so the Ani does the Akira, puts it in the hand of the Baal Habayis, and then the Baal Habayis brings it inside. In that case, the Ani did the Akira, right? But in both of those cases, right, we're only viewing it from the perspective of the person who did the Akira, right? We're not concerned with the Hanacha, because doing a Hanacha, if you only do the Hanacha, you're never going to be Chayav Achatas. However, when you do the Akira, right, we're concerned that if you did the Akira, you might end up doing the Hanacha, and then you would be Chayav a Korban Chatos. So therefore, because we're talking about from the perspective of the Baal Habayis, so we're only talking about when he extended his hand. Now, there are 2 ways that when he extends his hand, that you can be Chayav, that it could potentially lead to chiyuv chatas. That is when he picks up the item and sticks it out the window. So if the Ani takes it from him and puts it down, so he's not going to be chayav chatas. But if he were to put it down, he'd be chayav chatas. So therefore, we list that one. And when he sticks his empty hand outside the window, and the Ani then picks up an object and puts it in his hand, so that is the second example that can come to chiyuv chatas. Because if the Ani were to actually end up doing the hanacha inside the house, so then he would be chayav achatas. So those are the 2 that we're counting, but we're not taking into account just the hanachas alone of the Ani or the Baal Habayis in those cases, and those are the 2 cases that we're counting. Then of course for the Ani also, there's going to be Shtayim Shein Arba, there's going to be the 2 that he's going to be chayav midor, chayav a korban for, chayav achatas, and then there's going to be when he sticks his hand inside the house, and when he did the hanacha, or when the Baal Habayis did the hanacha, when he did the Akira or the Baal Habayis did the Akira, that is what we are going to count in terms of Shtayim Shein Arba. Okay, so those are the Shtayim Shein Arba for that the Mishnah is talking about, right? For the Baal Habayis, it's when he does both the Akira and the Anacha, and then it's when he sticks out his hand with an object, and it's when he sticks his hand out empty, and then there's the same thing for the Ani. Those are Shtayim Shein Arba. Fine. Now, the Gemara said Shnei and Peturin. The Mishnah said Shnei and Peturin, that when the Ani and the Baal Habayis collaborate on the Hotza'ah, so let's say the Baal Habayis did the Akira and the Ani did the Hanacha, so we said that they're both Peturin. So the Gemara asks, but between the 2 of them, a Malacha was done. Who cares that the Baal Habayis did the Akira and the Ani did the Hanacha? At the end of the day, there was an Akira and there was a Hanacha. That's the Malacha of Hotza'ah. So between the 2 of them, let them bring a Korban Chatas. So Tanya, we learn in a Brisa, Rebbe Omer says, Rebbe, Me'ama Aretz Ba'asosa. In the context of Korban Chatas, the Pasuk says, V'im nefesh achas techet ha-bishkaga, if one, nefesh will make a mistake and sin, Me'ama Aretz, from the people of the land, from the nation of the land, Ba'asosa, in doing something. Achas mitzvos Hashem asher lo teyasena v'Hashem, in the context of one of the mitzvos they did in Avera and they are guilty, so they bring a korban chatas. So the Gemara says, they make a drasha. It says ba'asosa ha'oseh es kula v'lo ha'oseh es miktsasa. Right? In order to bring a korban chatas, you have to do the complete Avera. Okay? If you only do part of it, so then there's not going to be any chiyuv chatas. Yachid v'asa osa chayav. If you have a single person who does the complete avera, or in this case hotza'ah, so then he's going to be chayav a korban chatas. Shnayim v'asu osa pturin. But if you have two people who split it, like over here, where the balabais and the ani are each doing half of the malacha, so then they wouldn't bring a korban chatas. Idmar nami, it's also taught by Amoraim. Amar B'chia Bar Gamda Nizika Mipi Chabura ve'amru. Says B'chia Bar Gamda that the entire group of students agreed. Ba'asosa Yachid Shasa Chayiv Shnaim Shasa Ua Paturin. That the pasuk says in the context of korban chatas ba'asosa, when in doing it, that one person who does it is going to be chayiv, but if two people collaborate on it, they are going to be paturin. Fine. Rav me Rebbe. So this is really interesting. We actually saw this twice in Masechta Brachos, this very similar context, right? Where you had Rebbe, Rav, and Rabbi Chia. Rav did something silly, and Rabbi Chia called him a Bar Pachti. Now, I thought Bar Pachti was a fool, but I don't know. Rashi seems to call him Ben Gdolim, the son of great people. Maybe some kind of euphemism. I don't know. But anyways, we saw that twice. We saw it by when Rav thought that Rebbe didn't say Kriya Shema, and Rabbi Chia said, what do you mean? What do you think he was doing when he covered his eyes? Then there was another instance in Masechta Brachos. Actually, the same story was quoted twice in Masechta Brachos, which was then when Rebbe asked Rav to get up and wash his hands at the meal, and Rav thought maybe he did something wrong, and Rabbi Chia said, Bar Pachti is just asking you to do Mayim Acharonim. So anyways, so we're going to have a similar setup right here also, which is interesting. So Ba'amine Rav me Rebbe. So Rav asked Rebbe, Hit'ino chavero ochlinu mashkin v'otzion lachutz mau. So let's say, somebody, I don't know, let's say Reuven picked up a box that was full of food and drink, and he gave it to Shimon, and now Shimon's carrying this box, and he's still inside. Okay. And then Shimon brings the box outside. So on the one hand, he didn't pick it up off the ground, right? Reuven picked it up off the ground and put it in Shimon's hands. Shimon then walked outside. So is he going to be chayiv for otzah or not? Right? So do we say akiras gufo ka akiras chayfetz mimukomo dami umichayiv? Do we say that when Shimon, picks up his body, i.e., he starts moving, so that is just like picking up it's the equivalent of having picked up the box off the floor, and he would be chayiv then when he goes outside, because he had an akira in Rosh Hashanah and anacha in Rosh Hashanah. Or Dilma lo, or maybe no, picking it up off the ground is what's important. Therefore, Reuven did the akira by picking up the box off the ground. Shimon then walked outside and put it down. He only did the anacha, and therefore there would be pater. So Amar lei chayav ve'eno dome liyado. So Rebbe answered, he's chayav. Shimon's going to be chayav. It's not similar to when, if you would, let's say the ani would stick his hand into the window, the balabais would put something in the ani's hand, and then the ani would take it outside to the Rosh Hashanah, and we said over there, he's pater. So we say, but that's different than over here where Reuven put the box in Shimon's hand and then Shimon went outside. My time, how come? Because gufo nayach yadolo nayach. The difference is that Shimon's body is standing firmly on the ground. And therefore, since his body is standing firmly on the ground, when he then moves, he's basically doing the akira, and when he goes outside, he's going to have the anacha and Rosh Hashanah. However, when the ani sticks his hand inside the window, so his hand isn't on the ground, right? If anything, his hand is attached to his body, and his body's outside in Rosh Hashanah, right? So therefore, because his hand, which is extended into Rosh Hashanah, is not on the ground in Rosh Hashanah, so therefore, when the balabais puts something in his hand and he takes it outside, it's not considered, hotza'ah to Rosh Hashanah. However, your body is different. Since your body is on the ground inside, when you then walk outside, you're going to be chayiv. Fine. The Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Chia l'Rav. So now Rabbi Chia says to Rav, why are you asking questions to Rebbe about Hilchos Shabbos? Bar Pachti, lo amin alach. Rav, didn't I say to you Kikai Rebbe b'hamesechta lo tishayle b'mesechta achrise dumu lav adaite. That if Rebbe is learning a certain Masechta, don't ask him about a different Masechta. And Rebbe is not learning Hilchos Shabbos now, don't ask him a complicated Shabbos, kasha about Hilchos Shabbos. The ilav, the Rebbe gav Rabbahu, if not for the fact that we're lucky here and that Rebbe is a very great person who knows the answer, kasaftia, you would have embarrassed him. The mishani lach shinuya, the lav shinuyu, because he may have been prompted to answer you an answer that isn't really accurate. Hashtamias shapir mishane lach. However, the fact of the matter is the Rebbe is a very great man, and he was able to give you a correct answer. But in general, you really shouldn't be asking people, questions in stuff that they're not currently learning, because they might be caught off guard and give you an answer that isn't correct. But in any event, Rebbe answered correctly. The Tanya, as we learn in the Brisa, hayaton ochlin umashkin mi ba'od yom. If a person already before Shabbos starts, if Reuven would have given Shimon if when it was still daylight, before Shabbos started, Reuven gave Shimon the box of food and drinks, right? But then once it became Shabbos, it became dark, it became Shabbos, he then walked outside, Chayav. So he's going to be Chayav because it's not similar to his hand, right? Whereas if, let's say the Baal Habayis would have put something into the hand of the Ani before Shabbos, okay, and then the Ani, when Shabbos started, he then pulled his hand out the window and put it down, right? So then he would be pater because his hand isn't connected to the ground. However, in the case where Reuven gives a box of food and drink to Shimon before Shabbos, and then on Shabbos Shimon just walks outside, he would be chayav because his body is connected to the ground, so it's considered like there's an akiras chayfetz in the Rishus HaYachid. Then he goes out to the Rishus HaRabim, there's a hanach over there, therefore he's going to be chayav. So now before we start this next part of the Gemara, so let's just give a little tiny introduction. So there are 4 different types of domains when it comes to Hilchos Shabbos, right? So we've of course been talking up until now about 2 of them, which are Rishus HaYachid and Rishus HaRabim, a private domain and a public domain. There's another domain, however, which is called a Karmelis, right? A Karmelis is something that is like a field or a vineyard, a place that isn't exactly Rishus HaRabim. There aren't so many people there, right? Not too many people hanging out there, but at the same time, it's not exactly a Rishus HaYachid. Like you wouldn't just like move in over there and make it your own private domain. It's kind of like an in-between spot. And then there's something that's called a Makom Ptur, which is a place that is just completely pater, right? It's not considered its own domain really. Okay, fine. Let's jump into the Gemara. So Amar Abai, says Abai, Pshitali yadu shel adam eina lo krishus harabim v'lo krishus hayachid. Okay, so Abai says, okay, it's obvious to me that a person's hand is neither like a rishus harabim or a rishus hayachid. Okay, and he explains, krishus harabim lo damya miyadu da'ani. How do I know that a person's hands is not considered like a rishus harabim? From the hand of the ani. You have the ani who's standing outside. He sticks his hand inside, okay? And yet we're saying that once his hand is inside with whatever he's carrying, right? It's not considered like his hand is Rishus Harabim. And if the Baal Habayis now takes something from his hand and puts it down, it's not like he's taking something from Rishus Harabim and putting it down in Rishus HaYachid. No. I mean, in my mind, his hand is just like absolutely nothing. His hand is just like a means of dangling this object inside. The Baal Habayis then sort of takes this object, which is already inside, which is in the Rishus HaYachid, and he puts it down in the Rishus HaYachid. It's not like he's taking something from Rishus HaRabim. Okay? Ki Rishus HaYachid lo damya, and a hand is also not like Rishus HaYachid. Miyadu the Baal Habayis, we know that from the hand of the Baal Habayis, right? That the Baal Habayis is inside. When he sticks his hand outside, and then the ani takes it and puts it down, so Kilu is just taking something from Rishus HaRabim and putting it down in Rishus HaRabim. It's not, he's not taking it from the Baal Habayis' hand, which is considered Rishus HaYachid. So in my mind, ki'ilu, if somebody sticks their hand outside the window, or through the window holding something, so that object just kind of takes on the status of whatever domain it's in at the time. The hand that it's in isn't really relevant. But Abaye asked the kasha, Yado shel adam ma'u shete'aseh k'karmelis. Okay, so this is like sort of an interesting question. I got stuck on it for a while, just trying to understand what the heck this means. But basically, the way I understand it is, let's go on for a second. Mikansua rabbanan le'adure legabe olo. Do the chachamim make a knas and say that he wouldn't be able to bring it back to where he is or not? So, for example, if you have the ani who's standing outside, now the ani shouldn't be picking up something in Rosh Hashanah and sticking his hand through the window into the Rosh Hashanah, right? Even if the Balabayas is going to take it from him and put it down, so it'll be Pater Aval Asr, but he has no reason to be picking up something Rosh Hashanah and sticking his hand through a window, right? It's something that there's no, maybe he could just return it and put it back down. Kilu, what does he gain by it, right? You're just running the risk of an Issa D'Oraisa, an Issa D'Rabanan. So the Chachamim perhaps make a knas, a fine, and say, you know what, Mr. Ani? If you stick your hand through the window, you're not going to be able to take it back out of that window until the end of Shabbos. Because magically, when you stick your hand through that window, all of a sudden your hand becomes like a carmelis. It's as if this object that you're holding is now trapped in a different domain. And if you now bring your hand back outside of the window into Rosh Hashanah, you'll kilu be taking this object out of this carmelis domain that it's in into Rosh Hashanah with you, and that would be Otzah Merishus Rishus, and that would be a problem. Therefore, you just gotta keep your hand in the window until Shabbos is over. Okay, fine. So Tashma, come in here. Haisu Yadu Malaya Paris. So we have a brayso that says that if you have a person whose hands were filled with fruits and he stuck his hand outside a window, so tanichada also lachzira, v'tanidach mutar lachzira. So one Tana says that you would not be allowed to bring it back in the window. The other Tanya says that you would be allowed to bring it back through the window. So my lab ba'akamifli. So let's say that the machlokes between these two Tanaim is the marsavar kikarmelis damya, or marsavar lav kikarmelis damya. So let's say that this question of Abaye is exactly what these two Tanaim are arguing about. That the Tana who says that you're not allowed to bring your hand full of fruits back through the window to where you are, is because he says that the Chachamim made a knas and said that your hand becomes like a carmelis. Therefore, you can't bring it back into the house because you'll be taking it from the carmelis into the house. Whereas the Mandam who says it's mutter, he says no, that we don't treat it as if your hands are like a carmelis, and therefore, so you picked up the thing in your house, and there's just a yachid. You stuck your hand out the window. You then put your hand back in the house, put it down back in the Rosh Hashanah. You had an akira and an anacha in Rosh Hashanah. That's no problem. When you stuck your hand outside and put it back inside, absolutely nothing changed, nothing happened, and it's okay. So the Gemara says, lo, the chuli alma k'karmelis damya. No, both Tanaim hold that if you stick out your hand out the window, it would be considered like your hand is a carmelis. Okay, well if that's the case, then why can you bring it back in? Vilokasha kan lamata me'asar kan lamayla me'asar. Oh. The difference is that the Tana who says that that he would not be allowed to bring his hand back into the house, it's because when he stuck his hand outside, it was within 10 tefachim from the ground. A tefach, of course, is the size of a fist. So if he stuck out his hand and it was within 10 tefachim of the ground, so it's kilu, he stuck his hand out to Rishus Harabim, and when he did that, so the knas of the Chachamim kicked in, and his hand is like a carmelis, he's not allowed to bring his hand back inside. But the Manda Amru says that it's mutter to bring his hand back inside, it's because he stuck out his hand outside of the window and it was above 10 tefachim, and above 10 tefachim is what's called a makom patur, a place that you would be patur, that it wouldn't be considered Rosh Hashanah. And so you just basically stuck your hand from Rosh Hashanah out into makom patur. So it's not like a carmelis, there's no reason for a knas of the Chachamim, so you can bring it back inside. Fine. v'i ba'isema. Or if you want, I will say, idi v'idi lemata me'asar v'lav k'karmelis damya. Or you could say that both Tanaim are talking about when he stuck out his hand within 10 tefachim of the ground, v'lav k'karmelis damya. And we don't assume that the Chacham made a knas to say that your hand is like a karmelis. Okay, so if that's the case, then why can't you bring it back in? V'lo kasha kanri ba'od yom kan mishechashecha. It depends. If he stuck out his hand to Rishus HaRabim when it was still daylight, so then says Rashi, says the Gemara, mi ba'od yom lo kansua rabbanan. So if he stuck out his hand when it was still daylight, and now it's Shabbos, and he wants to bring his hand back inside, it's no problem. The Chacham didn't punish you. They didn't make some kind of random knas to say you can't bring your hand back inside and you got to keep it out for the rest of Shabbos. That would be rough. Mamish, like at the beginning of Shabbos, you stuck out your hand right beforehand, and now you got to keep it there the entire Shabbos. But we're saying they didn't make that gezerah, that knas, and you could bring it back inside. Mishechashecha, but once already it's dark out and it's Shabbos, right? So then the Chacham said, what are you doing sticking your hand out on Shabbos, and then maybe you'll like drop it in Rishus HaRabim, and that will be like Hotza'ah. That's it. We're finding you, and you can't bring it back inside the rest of Shabbos. So it's not because it's a karmelis, it's just a knas of the Chachamim that they said, why are you messing around with Hotza'ah? That's it. Because you stuck out your hand on Shabbos, from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah, you got to leave it there the entire Shabbos. So Kansua Rabbanim. Fine. Okay. So we're talking about, both Tanaim are talking about when he stuck out his hand from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah within 10 tefachim of the ground. Okay. So into Rosh Hashanah. But it's not a karma. His hand is not considered like a karmelis. Yet, still, according to Mandam, who says it's also to bring it back inside, it's because the Chacham fined him for messing around with Hotzah and Shabbos, and he's got to leave it out the rest of Shabbos. Now the Gemara says, Adrabah, Ipcha Mistavra. So now the Gemara says, now in theory, really, the opposite, you can argue that the opposite would really make sense, which is, Mibu'od Yom, that if he stuck his hand out the window into Rishus HaRabim within 10 tefachim of the ground, when it was still daylight, so in that case, we would say that you can make a knas and say you can't bring it in for the rest of Shabbos. The ishadi lei lo asi lidei chiyuv chatas, that if he would then on Shabbos throw this thing onto the floor, he wouldn't be chayav chatas, because when Shabbos started, the thing was already in Rishus HaRabim. So therefore, if you would get tired, if his arm would get tired, and you would end up throwing the thing on the floor, so you wouldn't be chayav chatas, because it's really just throwing it from Rishus HaRabim into Rishus HaRabim. So that would be where the Chacham should really find him, that he can't bring it back inside. Because what's the worst that'll happen? He'll end up throwing it on the floor. He's not chayav achatas for that anyways. And at least they could find him and they'll teach him, don't mess around with Hotzah. But mishechashecha, the ishadi li asi bihu lidei chiyuv chatas, lo likansu rabbanan. But theoretically, I would argue that when he sticks out his hand to Rishus HaRabim from Rishus HaYachid within 10 tefachim of the ground after darkness, i.e. on Shabbos, so then I would say in that case the Chachamim would not fine him and say you can't bring it back inside, because there you actually have to worry about a chatas. If the guy's arm gets tired and he ends up throwing it on the floor, well then the knas of the Chachamim is going to end up leading to a situation where this person is actually over on an Issur D'Oraisa by having stuck out his hand from Rosh Hashanah into Rosh Hashanah on Shabbos and then thrown the thing on the floor in Rosh Hashanah. So theoretically I would argue that when sticking out your hand with something from Rosh Hashanah into Rosh Hashanah within 10 tefachim of the ground after darkness on Shabbos, I should theoretically argue that the Chacham would not make their knas over there, because they'd be concerned that their knas would end up leading to somebody being chayav achatas. However, umidlo kamishanina hachi, but from the fact that wasn't the Gemara's answer, rather the Gemara's answer was that when he stuck the thing out before Shabbos started is when they don't make the knas. But if he stuck out his arm when Shabbos already started, we would make the knas. So we see that when the Chachamim make a gezerah, they don't care if that gezerah might end up actually leading to, let's say, a chilul Shabbos, right? To a more stringent sin, right? So like when this guy sticks out his hand from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah, and he hasn't done anything wrong yet, theoretically, all he did was stick out his hand, but the Chacham said, we don't want you messing around with that, so we say, that's it, you can't bring your hand back in. What about the fact that if then his arm gets tired, he'll throw it on the floor, and then he will in fact be over the Isser of the Malacha of Hotzah on Shabbos? They don't care. So Tivshot de Rav Bevai bar Abaye. So let's use this precedent to then answer the question of Rav Bevai bar Abaye. Debai Rav Bevai bar Abaye. Rav Bevai bar Abaye asked the following question: Hidbik pas betanur. Hitiru lo l'radosa kodem shebalidei chiyuv chatas o lo hitiru. So there is so on Shabbos, if there is bread, so the way that they used to make bread, you could still see it in some places in Israel, is that they would basically make this kind of oven that they would use for baking bread, and they would take the dough and they would slap it on the walls of the oven. So midrabanan, you are not allowed to take the dough off of the wall of the oven on Shabbos. Okay, midoraisa it's not a malacha, but midrabanan you're not allowed to take it off the wall. So now what happens if somebody, forgot it was Shabbos, or maybe didn't know that baking was also on Shabbos, whatever it might be. By accident, he put some dough on the side of the oven, on the wall of the oven. Now, dough doesn't bake into bread immediately, it takes time to bake. So, he's not yet over on the melacha of afiyah, of ofeh, of baking on Shabbos. So only going to be chayiv for baking once the thing gets baked. So he wants to take down the dough from the side of the oven. The only problem is that there's a shvus, there's an issur d'rabanan, that you're not allowed to take dough off the side of the oven. So on the one hand, there's the issur d'oraisa of afiyah, of ofeh, and he wants to take down the dough to prevent himself from violating the issur of ofeh, and he would have to bring a korban chatas. But at the same time, if he takes it down, he would be violating the shvus d'rabanan, right? The issur d'rabanan of taking down, or rudia sapas, of taking down bread from the oven. So what does he do? So let's say that from the fact that we're saying over here that if the guy sticks out his arm from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah on Shabbos, we're finding him and saying you can't bring it back inside, even though he might end up then throwing it on the floor and he'll be over the Melach of Hotzah, he'll be violating the Melach of Hotzah. We say we don't care. The Chacham make the Gezerah nonetheless. So here also we're saying, look, we'll say that the Chacham made a Gezerah, you can't take down bread off of the wall of the oven, even though he's going to end up having to bring a korban chatas for violating, for doing the melacha of ofeh on Shabbos. We don't care. The Chacham made their gezerah, and that's that. So tivshot d'lo itiru. So let's say that you would not be allowed to take down the bread from the oven, and you'd have to bring a korban chatas eventually, when the bread bakes. So Gemara says, very good. Halo kasha v'tivshot. Yep. Very good. This is not a question. We know our answer. According to Rav Bevai bar Abaye, right, his question, the answer is you would not be allowed to take down the bread. Fine. V'bai sema. However, in answering in explaining this machlokas tanaim about can you bring the fruit back into your house once you've extended your hand from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Harabim, I can answer that machlokas tanaim by saying, alternatively, another answer, le'olam lo tivshot, and say that, or I guess ve'ibai say le'olam lo tivshot, or I guess you could say, really, we don't have an answer to Rav Bevai bar Abaye's question about if you can take down the bread. V'lo kasha, because there's no question in answering this machlokas tanaim about taking the fruit outside the house. Kan b'shogeg, kan b'mezid. That when we say that you can bring your hand with the fruits back inside of the house, is when you stuck your hand outside of the window by accident. B'shogeg lo konsua rabbanan. If he stuck his hand out of the window with the fruits by accident, so the Chacham didn't make a knas, and therefore he's allowed to bring the fruit back inside. B'mezid konsua rabbanan. However, if he stuck his hand out the window with the fruit on purpose, the Chacham made a knas and said, you cannot bring it back inside the house. Now, because of this answer, we don't have a way to answer Rav Beva bar Abai's kasha about can you take the bread down from the oven. Because I might say that when we say over here that when he sticks his hands out the window with the fruit, so b'shogeg, he could bring it back in. They didn't make the knas, but that might only be because when you take your hand, which has fruit in it, from Rishus HaYachid, you stick it out the window, you put it back into your house, you really didn't do anything wrong. The question is, did the Chachamim make a knas to say that you got to keep your arm out there the whole time? And we said, look, if you did it by accident, they didn't make that knas, but that's that. You're not doing anything wrong, technically speaking, by taking your hand, sticking it outside, and bringing it back inside. However, I can argue that by the oven, by taking down even though he put up the bread on the oven by accident, by taking it down, he's actually doing something wrong. He's violating the Isur D'Rabbanan of taking something down from the oven. So I might say that in that case, you would not be allowed to take down the bread from the oven. You'd have to leave it there. But at the same time, I can make a different argument, which is that when we say that b'mezid, if he sticks out his hand from the window, b'mezid, it's because, right, and the Chacham say that you're not allowed to take it down. That's only because the guy knows that if he throws the thing on the floor, he's going to be chayiv misa, right? Or he's going to be, if he does it on purpose, I guess, he's going to chayiv kares or whatever it is, for having thrown, right, hotzah mirshus or rishus. So they could rely on the fact that, that he's not going to throw it on the floor, and that's why they could fine him to keep his hand there all of Shabbos. But in this case, by the oven, if he doesn't take it down, so then he's going to end up getting to a situation where he's going to have to bring a chatas for baking on Shabbos. So therefore, maybe in that case, he would be allowed to take it down. So it's hard to tell. You can't. So by explaining that the machlokas between the Tanaim, when you stick your hand out with the food out of the window, is about shogeg versus mezid, then we actually don't have an answer for the oven, for Beva Bai's kasha for the oven, because it can really go either way. You can explain it both ways, to say either that you would not be allowed to take down the dough from the wall of the oven, or to say that you would be allowed to take down the dough from the wall of the oven. V'i ba'isema, or I'll give you another way to explain this machlokas tanaim about if you are or are not allowed to bring your hand back in your house when you stuck it outside with fruit from Rishus HaYachid to Rishus HaRabim. Idi v'idi b'shogeg. They're both talking about where he did it by accident. Okay, so if he did it by accident, then why would one Tana say that it's asur to bring his hand back in? The question is do they make a knas even for when you did it by accident, just because we're concerned that if you did it on purpose, then you wouldn't be allowed to bring it back inside. So therefore, do we say that even when you did it by accident, you're also not allowed to bring it back inside? Marsavar kansu shogeg atu mezid. One man Amr says that we do fine people who did it by accident, just because if they did it on purpose, they wouldn't be allowed to bring it back in. And therefore, it's also to bring your hand back in. Marsavar lo kansu shogeg atu mezid. The other man Amr says, no, they didn't make a knas, and therefore, if you did it by accident, so you could bring your hand back in. If you do it on purpose, you can't, but as long as you did it by accident, you could bring your hand back in. V'i ba'isema, and finally, one last explanation of this machlokas Tanaim about sticking your hand outside with fruit. Le'olam lo kansu, really there is no knas. And we're talking about where he did it by accident. By accident, he stuck out his hand with fruit from his window. Okay? And there's no knas. Okay, so then why would one mandamer say that you can't bring it back inside? V'lo kasha. Kan le'osa chatzar, kan le'chatzar acheres. So it depends. If he stuck his hand outside of his domain, of his Rishus HaYachid, right, into Rishus HaRabim, and now he wants to bring it back into the domain that he was in, that's no problem, right? That's fine. From Rishus HaYachid back into the same Rishus HaYachid, it's no problem. However, what if he's in a Rishus HaYachid, he sticks his hand out into Rishus HaRabim, but he's being very fancy. He figures instead of bringing it back into his own Rishus HaYachid, why doesn't he just throw it to an adjacent Rishus HaYachid? in which case, there is an akira in one Rishus HaYachid, a hanacha in another Rishus HaYachid, no problem. It's not Hotzah me Rishus l'Rishus. It's stated in Rishus HaYachid all the time. We say in that case, right, no, that would not be allowed. So when one man d'amar says it's mutter to lachzira, to bring it back into Rishus HaYachid, that's as long as it's the same Rishus HaYachid. Man d'amar says that you're not allowed to bring it back into Rishus HaYachid. It means that if you were planning to throw it into a different Rishus HaYachid, that wouldn't be allowed, because we're concerned about a situation where you may end up, throwing it into Rishus HaRabim, or just ending up putting it down in Rishus HaRabim. Kedabai minei Rava mi Rav Nachman, like Rava asked from Rav Nachman, Haysayadu milei Paris, if a person that had his hands full of fruits, v'otzia lachutz, and he stuck his hands outside, ma'u lachzir la'osa chatzer, can he bring the fruits back into the chatzer that he's in? So amrulei mutter. So Rav Nachman said it's no problem. L'chatzer acheres ma'u, but can he throw it into a different chatzer? Amrulei aser. He said it's not allowed. Umayshna. So Rava says, well, what's the difference? So Rav Nachman said, L'chiteichol ala kura de milcha. So Rav Nachman said something like, go eat a kor's worth of salt. Okay? It's basically saying like it's like a klutz kasha. How come? Hasam lo savida machshavto achis savida machshavto. Right? What's the reason why you want to take these peiros and chuck them into a different chatzer? Because you want to get them out of your chatzer. You don't have room for them in your chatzer, wherever you are. So you want to move them to a different chatzer. So by sticking your hand out of the window and then putting them back in, you didn't end up doing, this thing that you intended to do. And therefore you ended up just like essentially reversing back to the original situation that you were in. So that would be mutar. However, says Rashi, Machshavto, Sheniskabin lefanosa mechatzer zo. His intention was he wanted to get them out of this chatzer and put them in a different chatzer. Lo niskaima. He didn't, complete that. He didn't do that. Hilkach lo gazu. Aval chatzer acheres niskaima machshavto v'gazu do mazimna achrise shadi lu l'rishus harabim. But if his intention was that he wanted to clear out his chatzer into a different chatzer, we're concerned that in the future he might end up, clearing it out into rishus harabim, and that will be a problem. So therefore, you can't even do it into a different chatzer. But just to put it back into his chatzer, it doesn't change, it's the same status that was initially, so that would be okay. Okay, wow. Today was a complicated day, another complicated day. But there was a lot of ibai seimas there about how to understand this machlokes tanaim, but I think we're going a little bit deeper into, understanding the halachos of Hotzah Merishus L'Rishus on Shabbos, and yeah. I hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you all tomorrow. Bye.